All right. Yeah. Thank you so much again, everyone, for joining our second masterclass for digital pioneers. As you know, we are very privileged today to have someone who's a TEDx speaker and is currently the chief operating officer for Kurogo, which is a leading personal branding communications agency. So we have Louis Alexander Baxter, who will talk through how to build your operations and digital marketing toolbox. So yeah, I won't go through a lot about Louis, and because I know you'll be talking more about everything you do. So I'll hand it over to you.
Fantastic. Thank you, Ed. It's a pleasure to be here. Now, I've got a cheeky request for everybody. Now, when I'm doing online talks, it is awesome if I can see the people I'm chatting to. Now, that's not mandatory. I'm not forcing you to turn on your cameras, but it really does make it much easier for me if I know I'm talking to rather than just seeing a name. So if you're able to pop on your camera, even if I just see half of your face or you put it on for part of the session, that would be fantastic. There's no judgment. Doesn't matter what you look like. I've just been out in the windy outside of central London, so my hair's everywhere. And I was just saying to Ed before everyone joined, it's now spring and obviously all the leaves and the blossoms are going on the trees. And I ended up having loads of cherry blossom little things in my head and leaves. So I was just getting rid of those before I started the chat. Thank you, everybody, for popping on those the cameras. Nice to see a few faces. Sweet. Well, as Ed said, I'm Lewis. I'm Chief Operating Officer at a agency called Kurogo. We're a team of 17 full-time, and we have a few freelancers as well. I'll start by giving a bit of a high-level overview as to what Kurogo does and what my role is at the agency, and then obviously that will make sense as I kind of getting to the talk, the presentation for today. So Kurogo is a personal branding and communications agency. We work with founders, executives, public figures to build their brands and build their reputation. So we don't market companies, we market people. So that might be a CEO of a big business, it might be a politician, it might be a startup entrepreneur that's recently raised investment and wants to kind of get out into the public more and be more well known around their topics of interest. So we've worked with FTSE company CEOs and executives, as I say, all the way through to startup and younger entrepreneurs. My full name is Lewis Alexander Baxter. You can check me out on LinkedIn, Instagram, wherever you consume your social media content. I'm quite active on LinkedIn, put a lot of content out there about personal branding, around communications, around operations and scaling a business as well. In the last 4 years, we've worked with over 200 entrepreneurs across a range of sectors, and also in 15 different countries as well. The main countries that we operate in at the moment is the UK, US, and MENA region, in particular, Dubai. And what do I do? It's a very good question. Sometimes I ask that question to myself as well. What does a chief operating officer at a scaling branding and marketing agency do? Well, essentially, I oversee the operations and the day-to-day delivery of all things business. So that is looking after legal, looking after finance, looking after HR and recruitment, but then also tying into our marketing efforts. How do we get new clients? How do we keep the existing clients that we have? And how do we deliver the very best results that we can do for our clients? And at the moment, we have around 30 clients that we work with, as I say, with about 17 team members. My background, I've had about 4 years now working at this agency. I have half a decade experience in communications and operations and specifically kind of reputation management and comms with C-suite executives and also politicians as well, which, as you can imagine, would be quite an interesting and very varied role, particularly last year where we had the general election. Certainly kept on my toes for a couple of months on the run up to that. This year it's been a little bit more laid back on the politics front. Cool. And I'm also, as Ed said, a TEDx speaker. I've done two TEDx talks, one around mental health awareness and another one around social activism and social entrepreneurship. That notion that people can build businesses, but it can be for the greater good. You can do social entrepreneurship. You can do businesses that support charities, that support good causes, that have a real positive impact in the world. So, and I do a lot of talks like this to from charities through to small startup businesses, accelerator programs, VCs, the works. Now, I'm not going to do a death by PowerPoint presentation thing today. I want to keep it quite conversational, and I'm always happy to receive questions, thoughts, suggestions in the comments, or pop your hand up. There's honestly no stress there. I do enjoy engagement. I'd much rather that than me just ramble on for an hour and not answer any of your direct questions. So, as an operations director, as someone who runs the day-to-day operations of the business, it's so important to have your operations toolkit in place. What does that really mean? Well, operations is the backbone of a scalable business, right? It helps us to be efficient. It helps our teams, departments be as productive as possible. Operations helps keep costs down. And it also helps us to scale and to make more money, aim for that profitability that most businesses want to do, where you can then reinvest into new projects, new team members, new initiatives, salary rises, whatever it might be. Operations, I believe, is the real bedrock, the backbone of a successful business. Now, an agency lens is where I'm coming from. So as a marketing agency, just to give you a little bit of context, clients will pay us monthly. They'll pay us a monthly retainer, a monthly fee to deliver work for that client. But operations extends across any businesses. You need operations in hospitality and restaurants. You need operations in tech startups and SaaS products through to gyms, hospitals, you name it. There are a lot of chief operating officers around. My vantage point is coming at it from an agency, but a lot of the stuff I'm going to be sharing today is very relevant to early stage businesses. Just to give you a bit of context, I joined this business when we were doing a few £1,000s a month. We're now doing over $100,000 a month, and we've scaled that over the last few years. I was the first hire. We've scaled that team, as I say, to 17. And in that time, I've hired around 30 people from all over the world. We're a completely remote business. And that's why I think I'm quite, I suppose it's quite valuable that I'm sharing insights today. We don't have an office. Some of my colleagues have never met me, and I've been working with them for several years. So having a really strong operational backbone of a business makes sure, like us as a business, our team are collaborative, are well connected, are as productive as possible to deliver the best outputs and the best returns and impact for our clients. That fundamentally is why we are in business, right? And you might be running a consumer brand, you might be involved in a tech business. Who ultimately matters? It's your end user, it's your consumer, it's the people that use your product, use your service, and it's also your team. Those are the two most important people in our agency. The clients we serve and the team members, I want them to be as productive and as happy every single day to deliver the best work. How do we set up this operational backbone then? Like, what does that actually mean in practice? Well, I think the first thing that we've got to do is to separate a business into the different areas and different departments, right? Now, what that looked like to me is going to look something slightly different to each of you, but I'll start quite broad. What you want to start with is kind of your back office stuff, making sure that your legal and your compliance and your governance stuff is in place and robust. Couple of suggestions, a couple of ideas. Have you got intellectual property? Have you got a trademark? for your name and for some key messages that you want to use, or has someone else get a trademark, which means you can't use your name and you can't use your strapline. Always check that out and make sure actually how you're looking at Instagram handles. One funny thing, well, it's not a funny thing at all. A friend of mine trademarked a business and realized that they couldn't get the @ handles for Instagram and TikTok. Believe me, that was quite damaging because, as we all know, how much of our life is dedicated to social media. It's a really key channel to many businesses. So when you're looking at your trademarks, when you're looking at your Instagram handles, do them together when you're registering a name. Seeing a question come in, which is a really relevant question, actually, from Rebecca. I'll start with the trademark question. So what I would do is go onto the Intellectual Property Office. You can go on there and you can search a trademark. You can search it via logo, or you can search it via name, so a word. You can trademark both. I would always recommend trademarking the name and the logo for obvious reasons. Quick back step, my background is law before getting into operations. So that's why things like legal, finance, compliance, I'm pretty confident on and have some good guidance on specifically. So yeah, trademark, really important foundation. Things like insurance, get that sorted straight away. Typically, you can get insurance for a year, making sure you're getting the key ones. If you're doing things in public liability insurance, if you're employing people, you need to make sure you have the employer's liability insurance as well, health and safety stuff, making sure whatever your business is, map out those risks and work backwards in terms of what legal and compliance things do we need to set up before we start trading, essentially. Great question. Also just come in regarding trademarks. Do you know what? I didn't realize I was going to get so many questions about trademarks. I love it. That's fine. Let's talk about trademarks. When you register a business and buy domain name, is the trademark set automatically? It isn't. So you need to register a trademark with the Intellectual Property Office in the country of question. If your primary services or products is sold or delivered in the UK, that will be your starting point. Okay. And that's where you would get a trademark. It is actually quite self-explanatory. I am more than happy to answer kind of more detailed questions online and point people in the right direction with your specific case. But it is very straightforward online. It's a government website. They do talk you through it. You essentially register your trademark in classes. Classes might be consumer goods, tech, hospitality venue, depending on what your business primary activities are, that will be the class that you register your trademark in, and you can register in several different classes. Okay. I'm launching a new business. I am at the moment. It's an online marketplace for non-alcoholic and functional drinks. I'm going to register the trademark in non-alcoholic beverages. I'm also going to register a trademark in kind of retail spaces, just in case we want to do that. I'm also going to register in kind of festivals, pop-ups, activations, those sort of things. Pretty self-explanatory, really valuable. So once you've got the business name that you want to do, obviously looking at getting that domain, also look at getting the trademark, also look at getting your @ handles all in one go. Okay, they kind of should be done as a unit, ideally. What about trademarks across different countries? Well, that's to my point earlier around what's your primary country that you're operating in. I would start there as you then start to trade in other countries. And let's say maybe 10%, 20% of your activities and sales are in another country. You might want to start looking at trademarks as well in those countries. Just see if there's any more questions here. What if you're bootstrapping? Do you mind just clarifying what you mean by that in terms of not being able to spend money on things? Okay. Well, what I would suggest there is, registering a trademark. I don't know exactly how much. It's certainly under, it's maybe £100. It's not going to break the bank, and I think the risk of not doing it is greater than that investment. I appreciate people don't just have £100 lying around to invest, but it is an investment. Intellectual property is worth money down the line. When people buy businesses, you'll get that money back and some. We all know a recent case of this actually is like WH Smith, who has been bought by another company. That trademark value, that use of that WH Smith name and branding actually carried a lot of weight when that company was bought. So you will see the returns on that and down the line. If you register a trademark and someone has a similar name as your business in the same field and has been trading longer than you, can you get a trademark for your business? The short answer is it depends. You will have an independent person that will review your application when you submit. There is then a kind of a, they call it something, let's call it a, trying to think of the word. There is a period of time where an objection window. There's a period of time where a company can object to your trademark application. There are cases where a trademark is active on the intellectual property office, but where they're not actually using the trademark at all, and they might not even object. So just because you see a trademark for your exact name or similar name in the exact class or similar class that you're applying for, that doesn't necessarily mean you won't get the trademark. But obviously it very much depends on the nuances of the situation and whether they object or not. That's kind of a broad point. I'll answer these last kind of two questions on insurance, then I'll move on to a few other points. So yeah, we've got a couple here. Been in full-time in business for the past 10 months. I have public liability indemnity insurance. Does this protect me from sickness? What's the best thing to do for ensuring you're protected if you're really sick? Good question. I think that's one we'll have to take offline. It's a bit more of a technical one. I can definitely provide some guidance on that. There's a lot of caveats and if buts and maybes to that question. I wouldn't feel comfortable answering it so directly on a call right now. Yeah, if you're registering a trademark, so we've just gone that. Which form of insurance would be ideal for online tutoring business where we have employed other tutors online? Very good question. I think your standard one, like employer's liability insurance, public liability insurance, often you will buy a package from an insurance provider for a couple of £100 up to £1,000, depending on your exact services and the potential risk. Anything in public, where you're delivering things in person, that you might have electrical equipment and such, is going to be more expensive. Anything online, typically, as a rule of thumb, is slightly cheaper, just because there's less risk around the public liability piece. The biggest advice I'd give as someone who I'm on the board of a children's charity and I've set up a charity in the past that work with vulnerable young people and adults, safeguarding policies need to be in place for a service like that. So you can have all the insurance in the world. You need to make sure that you have relevant safeguarding in place. I would be looking at doing DBS checks. I would be looking at kind of doing those background checks on tutors that you are employing, especially if the people you're tutoring are under the age of 16 or are vulnerable adults. I'm sure you have that in place for Hannah, but it's always something I would recommend when we're dealing with young people. Cool. So yeah, that was we went down the rabbit hole of trademarks. I love it. That's great because it is such an important part of setting up that operational toolkit, as is insurance, as is I alluded to there around safeguarding policies and procedures. So when we're creating a website, if you're an app or a tech company and you're dealing with cookies or privacy policies, you need to really explain. You can find templates online. Shopify, for example, if you're an e-com store, will have build templates done by their legal team that you can use and adapt. Whilst I wouldn't recommend ChatGPT to write your policies, to give you ideas of what might be put into specific policies for your business, your website, it can definitely point you in the right direction. There's a lot of free resources online as well around how to create a privacy policy. Why that's important is if you're handling people's data, you need to have really clear kind of guardrails around what you do and what you don't do with people's data to make sure that you're aligned with GDPR regulations and other privacy policy regulations as well. So yeah, really important that you establish those things. Cool. Now, not only is kind of compliance and legal one part of the operations toolkit, but we've also got something like HR and people. So if you are hiring people, whether that's a full-time employee or several full-time employees, whether that's freelance or contractors, people doing kind of consultancy work for you, it's really important that we consider building the foundations of like a people department or a HR department. I hate the word HR, human resources. We are people, we're not resources. But anyway, people. So what might that look like? So the first thing I would make sure we have in place for employees or contractors is a relevant agreement. It's an employment contract if they are on payroll, and it's a consultancy agreement if they are a consultant or a freelancer. There are some broad things that you'd want to put into both of them. I'm not going to go kind of really in depth of what you need to put in an employment contract and what you need to put in a consultancy agreement. But as you can imagine, how much you're paying them, when are you paying them, what are their responsibilities, what is the policy around kind of sickness and absence. Those things are kind of important. Factoring in things like holiday pay for employees. There's a lot of stuff there that you want to make sure that you put in, but that's really important. Also, a staff handbook as well. So this is essentially a handbook with all of your policies and procedures that you want to put in there. Kurogo's staff handbook is about 75 pages. I do apologize to all staff when they join that there's quite a lot of stuff that you need to read through. That's everything from, data obligations and privacy stuff through to what our annual leave policy is, what our sickness policy is, what our maternity and paternity and parental leave policies are, compassionate leave, bereavement leave. You get the picture. There's a lot of stuff there that you need to get done really on day one of launching a business, particularly when you're hiring people, because once it's done, you only need to amend and revisit as the legislation might change or best practice might change. And I've actually found in 4 years, I spent a lot of time when I joined the business setting up those kind of people and HR foundations. I've not actually had to change much of those policies at all in the last couple of years. A couple of stuff on flexible working, because there's some government changes around that, things around national minimum wage, around parental leave. There was a few things that have changes. I would say a handbook is relevant for subcontractors as well. It might not need to be as in depth. Typically, employees have more rights than independent contractors, subcontractors, freelancers. That's a broad rule. So things like statutory sick pay, pension contributions, the piece around kind of parental leave, compassionate leave. Typically, employees that are on payroll or and under an employment contract have more rights. That's kind of the gold standard of employment. And as you work down into kind of a worker or an independent contractor, they typically get less rights. That doesn't mean they have no rights. Right. So it is important that we, in a handbook, would cover those things. I would recommend going onto a website called ACAS, ACAS. Got some lots of really helpful guidance. There's also, I can, and again, if anyone wants to message me after this with any recommendations for stuff around HR and people, I've got lots of recommendations. I consult things like ACAS on a regular basis. Also, law firms themselves put out a lot of really valuable content as well. I'd always recommend getting a HR platform early on in your kind of journey as an entrepreneur. It saves you a lot of time. We got a platform called Charlie HR. There's things called People HR. There's Workday. There's quite a few different platforms. Why do you need that? Well, if people want to book annual leave, you do it through a program rather than having to manually book annual leave for them. If someone's having a sick day, they can put it in that. You have full visibility of when people are off. It counts their sick days. You see when their annual leave is. You put a lot of their policies and procedures in a centralized location so you don't lose where the contract is or lose where they signed a particular policy. It's all in a kind of contained HR platform. We pay about £250, £300 a month for something like that. And that's because we've got up to 20 people. As you can imagine, if you've got 1 to 5 employees or contractors, it's going to be less than that. So it's really important because it's going to save you time and efficiencies. rather than you having to manually do a lot of those tasks those platforms do. Has anyone else got any questions on, I guess, HR, people, trademarks, insurance at all before I kind of move on? Cool.
Hello.
Oh, hello.
Yeah.
Question.
Hey, Lewis. Yeah.
Hi.
I've got a question. It's kind of different, but it's to do with like kind of building a team because I've got a business that I'm looking to venture in within sportswear. But I'm trying to. I've already registered it. I've registered the business, but I want to be able to find a good team and then progress from there. So, do you have any advice with that?
The first thing to think about is look at yourself in the mirror and think about what your strengths are, right? Because you're a driving force of this business. And it's so important that you, on a daily basis, are doing things that light you up and excite you. Doing what I would call an energy audit or a value audit. What gives you energy? What saps energy? Believe me, getting that done early on in your entrepreneurial journey is so valuable because then you identify your gaps of expertise and knowledge and areas of interest. You might hate a certain part of the business. That's something that I would start on. I'll give you two tangible examples. I'm not really a coder, a website developer, for example. So I've outsourced that because as much as I could learn it quite easily, I'd rather be spending my time doing other things. And when someone's had 7 years doing kind of Shopify website development, I think they know a little bit more than I could learn in a few weeks of trying. So that's one example. Another example is from Kurogo, actually. When I joined the business, the founder of the business was very much into marketing and doing the work for clients, but didn't enjoy as much the behind the scenes, the back office, the, dare I say, boring operation stuff. So that was really valuable that I stepped into the business 3.5 years ago because I could handle all that. So I handle all the contracts, all the legal stuff, the insurance, the data and the privacy stuff. We have a lot of non-disclosure agreements for many of our clients. I handle that. Negotiations with big clients, tender applications, right? You name it. All of that I handle. And what that allows is our founder and over the last couple of years is to deliver great work and also to fundamentally put his expertise into where he's most suited. Let's say you've identified 2 or 3 areas that you don't enjoy doing, it doesn't give you energy, and you feel like there's people better out there. That's when you start to look out for people. Now, I don't know your individual circumstances. I'm happy to kind of chat offline in the future to give you more tailored advice, but it would
Yeah, that
depend
would help.
on, is there a budget? Are you looking for people to kind of come on board as co-founders? What is their level of involvement? And getting really clear on what your expectations and standards are and obligations and vice versa. Where things are a little bit kind of murky or unclear and you don't draw the line in the sand, that causes more challenges down the line. So, for example, you might have identified you need someone to help with outbound sales. You might not be able to pay them, but you might say, look, I need 2 hours a week. I will give you X commission on projects that you kind of bring in or leads that you bring in. Let's do it for 3 months. We'll have a review at months 1, 2, and 3. You get where I'm going, where you're making really clear what your expectations are. You're not just saying to them, can you do business development for me? And away you go. You're being really kind of clear. Okay. As I say, more than happy to kind of have an in-depth discussion about your situation offline.
Yeah,
We've had
thank you very
another
much.
question, not at all. We've had another question about trademarking. I think I'm going to be dreaming about trademarking tonight, and I love it. So, for a new business that hasn't actually started training, still in development stage, would you advise also trademarking the business logo, although it might change and be redesigned? Great question. As a rule of thumb, if you believe your logo is going to change in the next couple of months, there is no point getting the trademark for the mark. Of course, get it for the name as a word, trademark that, and then you can subsequently trademark the logo after. An important thing to remember, don't bank on this, but if you've been trading, so this is not quite relevant to your example, but if you've been trading under a name and a logo, and then another company starts trading under that name and logo, and they haven't got a trademark, you can retrospectively kind of claim usage over that trademark. I don't want to get too overcomplicated, but essentially it is not the end of the world if you've been trading for a few months and realize, oh dear, I've not got a trademark. I've been using this, trademark, and maybe others have been copying the idea. Whatever. Don't worry about it. At your next opportunity, get the trademark, submit it. You'll get a couple of months, you'll get an outcome from that. And I think in your case, I'd wait until it's redesigned, to be honest with you, and get submitted again. A couple of questions from Rebecca. I'm loving these questions, people, like really great. It makes it so much more interactive and so much more valuable for me. I'm actually answering relevant questions rather than going down random rabbit holes. When do you think as a one-person business is the best time to scale? Fantastic question. So a rule of thumb I was always given from a finance perspective is kind of 30, 30, 30. So 30% of your income might be going towards core costs of a business to keep the lights on. Another 30% might go towards team. That might be one person, that might be 5 people. 30% goes to all that. 30 odd percent remaining is profit. Business owners can do what the heck they want with profits as far as I'm concerned. It's my job as an operations person and probably with a finance hat on is advising we spend that in the right area. Okay, is that doubling down on marketing efforts to then see more returns down the line? Is that hiring another team member to essentially accelerate growth? We've done that earlier this year. We identified a profit threshold that we wanted to hit. At that point, we went out to advertise a business development manager, and they've been at the business for 3 months now. That was because we made a conscious decision with the profit that we had to invest in a particular role because we believed, and it's an assumption, that that would take us to the next level as a business. And I'm very confident that that will be the case. Okay, so that kind of addresses your point. You might say, here's 30% of costs, like my rainy day fund, it covers and pays the bills. Your next 30% might be your salary, paying your bills as an employee and founder of that business. Then your other 30%, that's the money that I would start to think about investing into a team member. Another rule of thumb I want to give you. So that's the first one. 30% core costs, 30% team salary, whether that's one person or 5 or 20, and then 30% profitability is generally a good thing. If you're a super AI automations, like tech-empowered business, insert other buzzwords, you might be of higher profitability than 30%, right? But often people-centered businesses like agencies, you're not going to have 90% profit margins. Let's be realistic. 30% is a broad rule of thumb. The second objective, which I was going to say, that's an important thing. Have you got 6 months runway in your business, right? What that basically means is if you made no more money for your business, could you survive 6 months? That 6 months actually comes from the charity commission's guidance for charities. Typically, a charity needs to have 6 months of reserves. It's guidance. It's not kind of gospel. You must do. It's guidance. But do you have 6 months worth of administrative costs in the bank as reserves to pay for if you didn't get any more money in? Right. So that kind of answers your question as well, making sure that there's enough money in the bank that if you did employ someone, can you pay their bills, for 6 months and even longer, even if you didn't have that income coming in? Do you believe grants and investors are essential outside of savings and investments? What's the process to find grants and investors? Grants and investors aren't essential. It all depends on your individual circumstances, what kind of funds that you have to put into the business. And there's not a one size fits all policy to this. Some businesses need a lot more money than other businesses, right? I can guarantee if I went around this kind of call today and chatted to each of you would have different circumstances, different businesses, different costs. You get the point. So I don't think it is essential. It depends very much on your sector. I think there are a lot of benefits for putting a little bit of your own cash into what you're building. And I say that as someone that's invested into startups. And I think when a founder turns around to me and says, I've injected a little bit of my own money into this, I believe in it that much. I think that says a lot about the founder. Big caveat. I understand individuals from potentially underrepresented backgrounds, marginalized communities may not have £10,000 that they can invest into their new business. I'm in that case, right? And I'm in a full-time job, but I don't have £10,000 to invest in my own business that I'm launching at the moment. So that's where bootstrapping really comes into handy. I found 2 co-founders who support me on that journey. We're in it together. We're all chipping away and looking at that. But things like kind of equity, investment without equity. So looking at grants, things like Innovate UK is a really good starting point. I'd recommend you looking at that. Probably one of the biggest grants providers for the UK. It's a government funded initiative. And there's probably other grants available. Again, it depends on what your sector is. As an agency, typically you don't get investments. You charge a client X amount of money. Your costs are Y. You hope you can make profit. You make profit pretty much from month one if you do your numbers right. Whereas other businesses like tech, it's much harder to get those first customers. You have to put a lot more upfront investment to get your first client. Things like clothing or apparel, right? The things have to be made before you sell them, right? So that's another example where cash is really important. How much of your own money is a good amount, and what would you class as too much to put into your own business? That's probably a question for an independent financial advisor who knows your circumstances more than me. I wouldn't like to answer that question. Everybody has a different risk profile. Everybody has different personal circumstances. Yeah, that's a really tough question, and it's a question I know every single person on this call will have asked themselves, and I am asking myself at the moment. What I can say is this, from my experience, I have a salary that comes into my bank every single month from my primary source of income, which is COO at the business. I then have a rainy day fund of savings that I'm putting into every month. I then paying for my core bills, rent. I live in central London, is not cheap. Eating out, socializing, having a budget to do things that I want to do. And I've allocated a certain amount of money every single month that I'm going to invest into my new business. My 2 co-founders, we've all agreed, we've come up with an amount, each of us, that's the same, that we all put in because we believe in this to that amount. But that is not jeopardizing my future, my rainy day fund, right? Because I think we can all account for this, that it's the cost of living crisis, things increasing, inflation, the job insecurities. There's a lot of uncertainty and challenges that are facing this country and businesses at the moment. So yeah, that would be my answer to that question. All right, but speak to family, speak to friends, speak to careers advisors, speak to citizens advice, speak to an independent financial advisor. There's a lot of people well qualified to give you some good advice on that. Cool. I want to just move on to another kind of section now, which is around communications. So this is another area of the business that I would focus on. So I've mentioned kind of legal and compliance and trademarks. I've mentioned HR and people. This kind of ties into that, but it also ties into, I guess, delivery for your clients. So delivery for your clients, if you're selling sportswear, you're selling a product, will be your end customer. They're your clients. An agency like us, our clients are the people that are paying us every single month, several £1,000s to deliver a service for them. If you're a tech company or an app where you're guest subscribers to that app or members pay a membership fee to access the app, they are going to be your customers. So that's the point there. What you need to establish is some communication standards, or as what I call standard operating procedures. That's a buzzword I use quite regularly at the business. If you do something, make a process for that specific thing. If you raise an invoice for a client, chase an invoice, right? Create a process for that. Okay. I've got some templates I can share separately. I can again take it offline and discuss individual cases. But if there's something that you're doing in a business that needs a process, what I'm going to talk about today is communication specifically. So internally, we use Slack. I'd really recommend having some form of instant messaging tool, right? That can be for, partners, design agents working on your website. It could be employees. It could be freelancers. You need something like a Slack or a Teams or a Discord to basically communicate. We use Slack. Personally, I think is the best. I'm not sponsored by them, but I've enjoyed using it the last couple of years. Create communication standards around like, okay, what channels am I going to have? I might have a tech channel, a marketing channel, a sales channel. In our case, we have a channel for every single client. We also then have a Slack channel with that client. So an internal and external channel. Each department, each team has its own channel. You get where I'm going with this. Really important to establish channels on Slack. Why is that important? Well, as a remote company, communication is absolutely central to what we do. And for efficiency and to make us productive as possible, communication makes the wheels go around. So having those really distinct areas to communicate about particular tasks, deliverables, projects, campaigns makes comms so much easier. We've all been there on a WhatsApp group where, I don't know, Dave has messaged about something and you spend half an hour trying to find it and then reply to it in the thread. Slack cuts all that out, right? It's always better to have more channels than less channels, just learning from, speaking from experience there as well. Google Meet we use. I'm not going to go into why it's important to have a video conferencing platform in 2025. It is important. We use Google, Zoom, etc., something like that. And another two that I have in my kind of communications tech stack is Loom to do recorded videos. So why that's really helpful is if I'm giving feedback on content, feedback on a particular campaign strategy for a client, feedback to my accountant at Kurogo around some particular things, I'll record a video and send it to them. Honestly, really, really valuable. We also use it for pitches as well. So we've started to include sending Loom videos to potential clients on LinkedIn. If anyone uses LinkedIn regularly, you will know the unsolicited DMs that you get every single day of people trying to pitch. So much so, I missed Ed's message for quite a while when he invited me to speak here because my DMs are full of randomers trying to sell me stuff. So I was thinking, how can we as an agency, how can we as a business, a sales department, stand out from the crowd and get to the top of people's mind and ultimately increase our conversion rate? Rather than sending 100 random DMs to people that were copied and pasted, we're sending around 25 to 30 bespoke, tailored Loom videos every single week. Our conversion rate has doubled off the back of that. Response rate, people's interest in what we're doing as a business, the fact that we've taken the time to record. So what that might look like for you is, as I say, giving feedback to team members and colleagues, great way of doing it, rather than having to jump on a half an hour call every time. I can never pronounce the word, asynchronous, that's the word. So not having to be on a call at the same time, but being able to leave direct, valuable feedback. Also, with your sales cycle, really thinking about how Loom might play a part in that, or voice notes or something similar. I could talk for ages about business development approaches, but I'm going to pause there. Definitely recommend something like Loom. Just to give you a bit of some guidance on how do we go about setting up communication SOPs. Well, the first thing what we should be doing is, defining those clear internal and external communication kind of protocols and guidance. So what that might be is, what's the best practice on response times? How quick do you want to get back to team members? How quick do they need to get back to you? Okay, is it several times a day you want people to be checking their Slack or checking their emails? Provide that guidance in an SOP. What's the response time for when we're getting back to clients? What's the tone? Where is it okay to do bullet points, and where is further context or a Loom video more important? Another thing we've kind of put into our SOPs are templates. Templates for meeting agendas. If there's a meeting, there needs to be an agenda. If there's an agenda, why not template it so you don't have to write it up every time? Okay. Put it into the meeting invite so people know exactly what you're discussing. Keep it really, really efficient. If there's no agenda, don't have the meeting. You don't know what you're going to talk about and you're going to decide when you get to the call itself. That's not efficient and best practice. So what I would say about something like templates is what I mentioned about if you do something, or if there's a process in the business, something you do maybe repetitively or every single week, create a standard operating procedure for that, create a template for that. Okay. Meeting agendas, template email responses, so you don't have to type out the same replies to the same sort of people all the time. So for example, I have templated responses to applicants who have applied for jobs. I then tailor a specific sentence so it looks like it's personalized, because I ain't getting back to 1,500 people manually. Okay. So it's little things like that, little quick wins, little processes, little templates that will really compound and help you to get through your to-do list that little bit quicker. Okay. So yeah, really, really encourage you to think about kind of creating SOPs and creating templates as well. Where do you store them? I don't know if anyone uses Notion, but I love Notion. Notion's great. Notion is essentially our CRM, our project management tool, our essentially storage device for SOPs as well. We have a full board, which is our SOPs board. I mentioned each area of the business earlier. So we have legal, all our SOPs, HR, all our SOPs, finance and credit control, all our SOPs. Also, SOPs for particular roles as well. So we have SOPs for our web team and specific roles within the web team, specific for our account managers, our content writers, our head of sales, right? And what that means is if someone's got a question, you send them to the SOPs first. If the answer's not in the SOPs, what do you have to do? Create an SOP to answer that question, right? So you're constantly adding to that and building out a really rich database of stuff. And my final point on SOPs generally is they're really helpful if you're handing over work to someone for a week, for 2 weeks, for a month, if you're going on holiday, or if you're ill. That's why we have those processes and templates in place. Okay. The next thing that I really, really encourage is project management. Okay. I've mentioned comms. That's obviously the bedrock of something like project management, but it's really important to have a project management kind of software or system. We use Notion, or ClickUp is part of the Notion family. It's essentially a task management software. So why is this important? Why bother with task management? Well, the first thing is it keeps everyone accountable. You know who's responsible, who's the project lead, who's involved in particular projects. You need to also put in kind of key deadlines, key responsibilities of particular people. You can also integrate that with like Slack or Google, so it sends you automations and reminders of when you need to complete particular tasks. Really, really helpful. At the end of every week, we send out mini reports to a client, like end of week check-ins. Well, the automations are set up so everyone gets a notification on a Friday, do your client check-ins, right? And that removes that human error, that Friday, end of the week, I forgot argument. Actually, you're getting those reminders constantly through. Yes, that's just something I hear a lot, Rebecca, actually, around creating, having a CRM system for something, or having Notion for particular things, but it feels a little bit messy and untidy. Every quarter, I do an audit of the SOPs, I do an audit of our Notion boards, and I clean things up, right? So put that reminder, but create that task for yourselves every couple of months. Do a sweep through, see which ones are the most unclear, start there, and a kind of reconfigure, redo, create a template for something like that. Again, there is lots of AI nowadays that can really support you with creating SOPs. That it really is that simple. So I do use ChatGPT a lot to support me with creating my processes. I have a template now, and I was creating a client referral bonus last week. So clients refer other clients. How do we incentivize those clients? I inputted our core template for our SOPs. I then prompted it, gave it some instructions, and the output was a pretty decent, like 90% there, client referral process. So once you've got the template, once you've got a way of working or creating an SOP that works for you, that will then be a real catalyst for creating more. And you'll just get better at creating. I've been doing this for 4 years. Right. So of course, over that time, I've got better. But there's always kind of room for growth, room for making things better. And the important thing there, Rebecca, is you're aware of the fact that it feels a little bit messy. That's awareness is the first key to actually solving that problem. Okay, cool. Does anyone have any questions about SOPs, workflows, setting up kind of that operations toolkit while I have a quick swig of my water? I think it's customer resource management, something like that. Do you know, it's a question I was asked a few weeks ago and I can't remember. Customer relationship management. Interesting. That's what it is. Yeah. So essentially a CRM, something like HubSpot or Salesforce are probably the biggest on the market. We use one called Go High Level, which is a specific one for marketing agencies. What can't a CRM do? In short, it tracks your prospects, your leads, the pipeline of businesses that you kind of are speaking to. We have various stages of that process. For example, initial reach out, discovery call, proposal call. What's the next stage? It might be sending contracts over. You're moving through people through that pipeline. Also, if you need to call a client or call an old client an old prospect that you want to try and get back on at the business, you go into the CRM, you've got all their details, their call logs, their notes that you've made in the past. Really good, really, really valuable to have CRMs. I spend quite a lot of time in that. If you're starting out genuinely, start with something like Notion. It's pretty good for a CRM. It depends on how many prospects you're basically speaking to and what your business is. But yeah, I would recommend starting with something like Notion. You can set up some notifications and some reminders in Notion. So if a certain due date is hit or a deadline is kind of lapsed, you get a notification, you get a reminder, you get a nudge to reach back out to that person. So an example might be if you're doing some cold email outreach to prospects, so essentially email marketing, you might have send email 1, 5 days later, you get a reminder to send email 2, 5 days later, you get a reminder to send email 3. It just, again, removes that chance of human error. Where's the best to go? What is it that you do, Rebecca? You can type it or you can answer it. I think that would be valuable. Because then I can answer the question more helpfully. Probably typing, aren't you? Okay, cool. Yeah, I mean, obviously, for new clients, if you're trying to win new clients, I'd consider something like HubSpot or something like Go High Level, right? So if you, from a sales perspective, that's valuable. From a project management perspective, i.e., handling briefs, briefing creators, briefing editors, Adam, we do something similar. We use ClickUp for that. Monday.com's pretty good as a project management thing. I'd recommend that. But from a purely business development and sales perspective, HubSpot, Go High Level are probably best bet to take a look at those. Salesforce is probably the most expensive on the market. Our business development manager came from tech, and apparently a lot of the businesses in tech and SaaS use Salesforce. From agencies, HubSpot is a pretty good one. So take a look, have a look at some trials, have a look online. That's the immediate answer to that question, though. Okay, cool. Just have a quick 30-second pause, refresh. I want to just go into another section. We're going till 2:30. Is that right, Ed? Have I made that up?
No, that's right.
Excellent. Time flies when you're having fun. We're an hour through. Does anyone else have anything I've spoken about so far, or any questions about your business around operations, around scaling, around hiring? If you want to pop a question in, let's just have a couple of minutes of a Q&A specifically. For the last half an hour or so, 25 minutes, I'm going to go into personal branding specifically. Okay, how you as a founder, as an entrepreneur, can build your brand, build your profile and reputation to attract opportunities. That's what I want to center the kind of final chunk on. So we'll go on to that. What about communications with potential clients, public? How would you go about getting contact information for people to add to some sort of mailing list? Don't do that, in short, because of the GDPR regulations. You can't find people's emails and put it into your mailing list without an opt-in. Okay. There are ways around that. I'm not saying loopholes. I'm just saying there are other things that I would consider doing. Ultimately, and we're going to go on to this with the personal branding briefly, but just think about kind of marketing, communication, branding as a funnel. We need to get people into our ecosystem of our brand or our personal brand, right? That's the top of the funnel. Get people into the funnel, and then we bring them down the funnel, okay, through different types of content strategy. Mailing list, email marketing, right? To, for example, nudge someone to buy your product or give them a reminder that there's one spot left to join your webinar. That's bottom of funnel or conversion content, right? So that's obviously a really, really valuable type of content and marketing. It's ultimately getting people bums on seats. It's getting people buying your product, investing in your service. What I would start to think about first is how do we get people into our ecosystem, okay? Organically and as cheaply as possible. You could invest in SEO, get your website ranking higher up on Google. It's going to cost you money, okay? You might consider Google Ads, right? Again, whether you're a product or service, if people type in your name or if people are typing in your type of service or product, you're ranking higher. You're in the shopping bar of Google Shopping or whatever it might be, right? So I would consider that. But the cheapest way is building your personal brand. Okay, it is investing in yourself, putting out thought leadership content, storytelling, sharing your insights and learnings of building a business, sharing the highs, sharing the lows, as cliche as that sounds, positioning you as a marketing channel for your business is the best way to attract those inbound opportunities, essentially. So I would really consider, as a starting point, thinking about how do I get people aware of my brand, my company brand. And I would start with, well, building your brand. I think gone are the days where a random company could just create content and people would buy, right? I was on a call yesterday with an IT company. Quite frankly, the name is boring. What they do is boring. And I have absolutely no interest in buying from their products. But when he started telling me about his background, when he started telling me about his stories and what he gets up to the weekend and his highs and lows of scaling an IT company and some of the challenges that he faced in 2008 in the financial crisis and how, what are the developments and trends that are coming out of kind of the AI wave that we're seeing at the moment. Now that's really interesting. Positioning him as a figurehead of his IT company, him sharing thought leadership, developments and trends, what's happening. Him almost being like a real key person of influence within his space will attract opportunities. And through that, people will become aware of his brand, right? So even in the most boring of sectors, I'm sorry if anyone works in IT or knows anyone that works in IT, but in even quite boring and traditional and old-fashioned sectors, still personal branding is a really, really valuable way to attract opportunities. I'll come back to your question on grants and in investors. Adrian's asked if we want to get in touch with you about our specific business situation. Yes, LinkedIn's great, or you can use my email, which I am badly spelling. Pop that into the chat. So feel free to drop me a line or add me on LinkedIn. That's no problem. Alexander, yes, you've mentioned podcasting. Really good. That's another way to basically get people into your ecosystem. What I mean about ecosystem is basically people who've never heard of you before or your business. How do you get them to have heard of you, right? And that could be going to events and networking. Yeah, there's definitely still a room for that. But I think the best way to get thousands of people to hear your insights and to learn about you is to create content online. We've seen people like Stephen Bartlett, right? Even Richard Branson for decades build a founder brand to scale their businesses ultimately. Ben Francis and George Heaton have built in public with Gymshark and with Represent respectively. Okay, we've got other consumer brands like Trip, Perfect Ted, right? Others that possibly have appeared on Dragon's Den and the likes as well, where their founders are the face of that brand, okay, to build trust, to build credibility. And we all know people buy from people. It's another cliche, but it is so, so true. And the data suggests that as well. In the US, 65% of a company's market value is attributable to the CEO's reputation. Okay, so we see that. People have said, if Elon Musk stepped away from Tesla tomorrow, those stock prices would go down significantly. The faith in that business would go down significantly. Jeff Bezos at Amazon, right? There's this really, Ben Francis at Gymshark, there's this really directly proportional relationship with the founders and CEOs' reputation. It works the other way as well. What happens if their reputation does tank? What happens if they get into trouble? Our faith and our trust in them and their brand will decrease as well, right? None of you are going to get into trouble. You've all got positive personal brands, but it does work the other way as well. Okay, cool. So let's just go into, because I know a couple of those questions now have kind of getting into sort of personal branding specifically. So let's go into that right now. What is personal branding? I just want to ask you that question. What the heck is it? I'm not going to go around and ask every single one of you, but I just want to start with a quick definition so we're all on the same page, so that my guidance is actually then quite valuable. Don't know what I was doing with my hands there, but YOLO. Anyone want to answer that question? What do we think personal branding is? What's your definition of it? You can put your hand up, you can tell me, or you can pop it into the chat. Great. So Alexander said it's kind of the goods and services that reflect you. Marketing yourself as the face of the brand, being authentic, building a community who trusts you as an expert. That's what Rebecca said. Adrian, creating content about yourself. Yeah, absolutely. So on a strategic level, personal branding is essentially about framing the skills, expertise, experience, values, your personality you have in the best way possible in order to build the reputation you deserve, right? It's a marketing and brand strategy that helps position you as the entrepreneur, as a thought leader and an expert in your field, okay? So our founder at Kurogo, one of the leading personal branding agencies in Europe, we need to position him as an expert in personal branding. Sounds crazy, right? Doesn't it? But how are we to attract awesome clients as a personal branding agency is if our CEO doesn't position himself as a thought leader or expert in personal branding. Feel free to check out Sam online. Once you find me on LinkedIn, you'll find Sam quite quickly through Kurogo. He's got 40 odd thousand followers, and a lot of the leads that come through LinkedIn, through to our business, come through his LinkedIn. He is a real kind of magnet for opportunities. Me, lesser extent, but I get a few leads now and then, which is a good thing. So yeah, it's really about positioning you as an expert and as a thought leader. Okay. Other definitions. Personal branding is your online reputation. It's your being a go-to authority. It's your profile, those sort of things, right? I think we're all on the same page. What is it not, though? And I want to just caveat that very briefly. It is not about forging a false representation of yourself. It's not trying to trick people. We're not trying to be someone that we're not, right? Because that's inauthentic, to Rebecca's point. That will quickly get found out. It is just about kind of embodying and representing your in real life self online. Okay. Whether that's through content, attending podcasts, speaking on stage, going to events, that's all your personal brand, right? Packaged up together, an embodiment of you. It's also not necessarily about self promotion and boosting your ego. Okay. The best brands that we have built and ones we have seen is not those that constantly want to be in the limelight, but those that actually spotlight other people, other ideas, and other strategies. Okay. So if you approach this as, I just need to build my personal brand so I'm famous and I'm well known, and you don't actually think about, okay, how might that impact the business? How might that impact my colleagues and the wider sector as a whole? You'll find yourself setting yourself up to fail. So it's really important you understand that your why, why you're doing this, your true values, what your objectives are with your brand. And I'm going to give you some strategies and tactics very shortly on how you can go about building yours in a nutshell. And also, big caveat, personal branding is not about becoming an influencer. Believe me, there are better ways to do it than posting on LinkedIn. There is a correlation between possibly, the more you build your brand, the more followers you get, you might become an influencer in some kind of some definitions of the world, but there is a difference. I think those that are influencers or UGC creators in fitness, in wellness, in fashion, yes, there's some overlap with personal branding, but I would just see it slightly separately. Okay. What we have seen though is many influencers become entrepreneurs, become really strong personal brands. A couple of examples that come to mind. Grace Beverley, okay, started content creating when she was at Oxford University, and people came along on that journey. She set up Tala, she set up Shreddy, she set up the productivity business as well in the last couple of years off the back of her influence and reputation and brand. Okay, we're seeing this more and more. Imon Gardzi as well. George Heaton launching Cadence. Yes, he was founder of Represent the brand, but he set up a drinks brand now, again, off the back of his reputation, influence, and profile. So there is a little bit of overlap there as well. Okay, one of my favorite creators, influencers turned entrepreneurs is Ali Abdaal, right? The productivity guy, right? Built his brand around productivity. And then look, he's launched some products around productivity as well, a course, some workshops, and also his Tippy Tappy keyboard as well, which did insane amount of sales. If you've not checked out Ali Abdaal's old productivity content, I definitely would recommend that. His book too, which is somewhere here. Feel Good Productivity. I was at his book launch in London last year. It was very cool to hear him speak as a fairly big fan of his. Cool. So that's basically what personal branding is. Okay. My favorite quote about personal branding is by Jeff Bezos. It is, your brand is what other people say about you when you're not in the room. Just let that sink in. That's what personal branding is. How are other people defining you? When someone says, I was out for dinner with Lewis last night. How are they describing me? Okay. Your brand is what other people say about you when you're not in the room. Really, really important quote. I love it. Why build your personal brand? Right? Why build it? Why even bother? It's going to improve your brand image and your visibility, allow you to start, whether you're championing a cause, talking about your business, it's going to increase that visibility, that top of funnel I mentioned as well. Build trust and credibility. Okay, people start to get to know you on not a transactional level, but on a deep, meaningful level. They get to understand your vision and your values. What do you stand for? The principles, your ethics. Okay, your storytelling as well. You might have some common alignment with many, many people that do follow you and do buy your products. That's an important part. Allow you to connect with other industry figures in your space. If you start to become well known for building a sports brand, building a consumer brand, building a drinks company, building a SaaS product, or an AI product, well, people are going to be wanting to surround you and want to connect with you, right? Other industry figures in that space. That's a really important benefit of building your brand as well. You might land speaking opportunities, you'll get invites to podcasts. Getting yourself out there and raising your profile will increase the inbound opportunities that you come your way. Okay. Anyone who hasn't posted online, who's a founder, who doesn't really build their personal brand, the likelihood of them being invited to speak at an industry leading event or speak on stage to deliver a keynote or to become on that go on that really cool podcast. Okay. They're not going to get those opportunities. Okay. They're basically missing out on so much untapped opportunities and potential by not putting themselves out there. And what I often say to people who are reluctant is just think about your competitor now. Imagine they're showing up online every single day. You know your product and service is better than them. You know your values, your story, your why, your mission is better than them. I'm not making it all about a competition here, but I'm just making the point that they're showing up online and you're not. They're getting all the opportunities and you're not. They're getting the invites to speak on stage, the sponsorship opportunities, winning the best clients. Okay, having people queuing up at their door because they want to work for their brand and not yours. Think about what that's going to make you feel and the impact of that. Okay, so really, and I touched upon another point there. If you're looking to build a team, get volunteers, get investors, putting yourself out there and starting to communicate your brand message to the world, that's going to increase the likelihood of that as well. We've hired about 30 people in 4 years. We've not spent a penny on recruitment fees. We've not used a recruitment agency. A lot of our applications come from people who are in my network already. Okay. People that have followed me on LinkedIn for 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 years. People that have come across Sam's journey as well, talking about personal branding. They want to work with the industry leader of personal branding, right? And people will want to work with you if you're positioned as your authority in your sector as well. So that's a really, really important point as well. To attract top talent, building your brand is really valuable as well. I also think it future-proofs your career. I really hope everything you're building now pays off and you're successful. Of course I do, right? But let's say you've shown up online and whatever you've been building, it didn't take off. You didn't get the results that you wanted. You've got to network them. You've got contacts. You've got people who might be offering you that next opportunity. By putting yourself out into the world, and believe me, I've headhunted people because they've got a strong personal brand, because I know what they stand for. I know what their insights are on particular topics. I know how deeply they care about the topics that interest me. As a personal branding agency COO, when I'm trying to hire people, I want people to live, breathe, and be so deeply passionate about personal branding. Of course I do. because we're trying to build the go-to personal branding agency here. So when I'm looking at CVs, I'm looking at applications, I'm looking at cover letters, I'm also stalking LinkedIn. It sounds really creepy, doesn't it? But I stalk people's content and LinkedIn, and I want to ask myself the question, does this person really deeply care about personal branding and the topics? You apply that to your sectors, and you can just see how important building that online reputation is. Okay, the last three things I want to talk about is how. How do we do this? What are some of the action steps you can literally take away at 2:30 today and start to think about your personal brand? I could talk for probably 10 hours about this nonstop because I've got so much to say. I'm going to try and package it up. And for your sake, I'm not going to speak for the next 10 hours. I'll speak for the next 10 minutes. But there's a couple of key messages I want to leave you with. Okay. What vantage point am I coming from here? Well, I have built, and our team has built, over 250 brands now for FTSE companies, some of the biggest companies in the world that you will have known, love, and probably buy from, all the way through to startup and scale-up entrepreneurs. So I've got a good understanding of that, but also, as I say, background in politics and charity work as well. So quite a broad lens. And here are some of the things that I would start with. Think about building your strategy first. Don't run into creating content tomorrow. Start with strategy. There's a few things you can do to do this. Think about your why. If you haven't done so already, read the book Start With Why by Simon Sinek. Also watch his YouTube. Again, I'm not sponsored by Simon, but I think he's really good. He helps organizations, individuals understand their why, their purpose, their origin story to ultimately allow them to sell their product, to get out to the world. Okay. Why do you, as a young entrepreneur, need a personal brand? What are your objectives? Really think about your why. Why are you even bothering? What is the impact you want to have in the world? Okay. Think about that as a starting point. Okay. Why get up in the morning to build what you're building? That's the question you really need to start with answering, because the following questions become much easier if you've got that purpose, that why ingrained. Start to map out some objectives. If your why is to, for example, I'm thinking of a really specific niche example here, but like to reduce, a plastic waste. You have a business that is a sustainable business. Your ethos is around that. You might start to think, okay, that's my why. How do I break down that kind of deep why into clear personal brand objectives? Okay, in 2 years, I'd love to do a TEDx talk on sustainability, right? That I'm using this example. Okay, in a year's time, I want to be invited on to podcasts. List a few. It's a little bit manifesty. You're manifesting a little bit as well. You're mapping out what that ideal roadmap looks like. You obviously want it to happen, but I think that's really important to start putting those personal brand objectives down. You then get to like a 90-day tactical plan. What do you need to do? What levers do you need to pull in the next 90 days to essentially help you get to those goals? Okay. The next thing we need to do is identify who your target audience is. Who's your ideal customer profile? Okay. Who are your key stakeholders? Who are you looking to get in front of? Okay. Get really granular here. Consider demographics. Who are they? The size of the organization, the location, what sectors are they in, for example, and also psychographics. What's their belief systems? What are their interests? Okay. What's their attitudes to certain topics? What are their values? Okay. So again, mapping back from who you're trying to get in front of or who your ideal audience is, that's going to help you answer the question, well, what the heck do I create? What content do I put out there? You need to start with the who. Who are you trying to get in front of? Really, really important. Start to then build out why people should listen to you. Why? What's your standout qualities? Why are you credible? Why are you an expert in your field? Is it the amount of years experience you've had? Did you do a dissertation or a paper at university that was on that particular topic? Have you volunteered in that space for a while? Have you literally just been building apps since you were 10 years old? That's part of your story. It's part of your narrative. And that's part of why people should listen to you. Have you had any notable landmarks, awards, any sources of credibility that you can leverage? Okay. In my case, been on quite a few podcasts, I've done 2 TEDx talks, I've been featured in a few newspapers and been on TV and been on radio, right? But that's been accumulated over 7 or 8 years. It's not happened all in the last 2 months. It's happened over a while. So do think back to the last 5 to 10 years and consider what are your sources of credibility. Then you can pause. You've answered your why. You know why you're doing, what your purpose is. You understand roughly what your objectives are for your campaign, what you're trying to do with your brand. You've also answered the who. Who are you trying to get in front of? And then you've thought about, well, why should people listen to you compared to the next person? Because that's what positioning is all about. That's what building a strategy is all about. I need to make sure I don't sound like the other 100 people that are talking about my topic, because you're just going to get lost in the noise, quite frankly, right? So really understanding that why you're different. Then you can start to build a content strategy off the back of this. Okay. A quick little bit of advice is don't try and do 50 channels all at once. Okay. Believe me, it's not sustainable. Think about who you're trying to get in front of and your purpose, all those questions we've just discussed above, to then think about what's the biggest lever in terms of a social channel that you can pull that'll give you the most returns, essentially. If you're B2B, if you're looking to get in front of businesses, get in the door with professional services, lawyers, architects, people in financial services, LinkedIn's probably going to be the best channel for that. Equally, what's really interesting, I can't say the name of the brand, I'm not allowed to, but there's a really well-known food brand that gets about 30% of its income through LinkedIn, a consumer brand. You'd think, how the heck would this brand that is basically eaten by people every single day get so much of its sales from LinkedIn? So I would just say, if you're doing a product, the point I'm making here, if you're doing a product, selling a product, don't underestimate the power of LinkedIn, right? Because it's used by 800 million, I think maybe even a billion users worldwide. It's a very active platform, and I'm going to continue to see that trend in the coming years as well. If you are, a beauty brand or something in fashion, you might want to think about, you're the more visual channels, TikTok, Instagram, YouTube, probably quite valuable there. If your target demographic are 18 to 24-year-olds, again, take that into account when you're selecting your channel. 1 to 2 channels, start there, learn, test, iterate before you start rolling out over 10, 15 channels. Believe me, I've done that. I've done that. We've done that with clients, and it just does not work in the long run. And you burn yourself out. Okay. Let's say you've thought about LinkedIn as being your channel now. Okay, LinkedIn is my target. Right, I'm going to do this for a couple of months. Here's some objectives. I'm on 1,000 followers now. I'd like to get to 3,000. I want to become well known in tech, in AI, in property, in fashion. Okay, what do I need to start talking about now? What are my content pillars? That should sit under that strategy. I'd probably build 4 or 5 content pillars, no more. Because again, you don't want to spread yourself thinly. So one of the pillars might be storytelling content, personal stories, insights. What are your learnings of your entrepreneurial journey so far? What's gone well? The people you've met, the conversations you've had, the first product launch that went better than you thought it did. That time you did an event where 3 people turned up and you made £37. I'm speaking from experience. Those are the stories and things you want to start sharing. Get people to know you. Don't jump to sell and talking about the products and features and why people should buy from you. Start with Your stories and insights, really important. Another content pillar might be, what are some of the trends and developments that are happening in your sector? Talk about them. Monitor the news. Give your opinion on those things. I think that's always a really valuable thing to do. We have a client in property, real estate, architecture. We're talking about the recent legislation that's happened and doing some comms around his take on those particular legislative changes. That's something you read. That's free content. You're basically just repurposing news and developments and trends that are already happening. I'm not going to give you any more examples, but the point is, map out what you want to talk about and start to compartmentalize into different topics. Offline, if you want to kind of pick my brain around your content topic, send me a message and I can give you some feedback and thoughts. More than happy to do that. Okay. Final thing I'll mention, which is around, okay, you've got this strategy, you've got this content strategy now, you've identified some topics, some content pillars that you want to talk about. Okay, final thing to consider is, let's break down these types of content. So I mentioned earlier, you want top of funnel, middle of funnel, bottom of funnel types of content. So your top of funnel content is awareness content. This is those personal stories and anecdotes. This is industry advice, broad commentary on what's happening in the space, you sharing learnings of what's happening in your business, that building public narrative that a lot of people really love and get behind. That's awareness content. It's broadly targeted to not only your ICP, your ideal customers, but it's targeted to anybody in essence. Okay. Your goal there is to grow your audience, how you measure success, views, followers, engagement. Okay, you're getting eyeballs on your content, number one. Number two, consideration content or middle of funnel. Your goal here is to start targeting at your niche. Okay, so this might be how-to guides, predictions about the space. You see how we're getting a little bit more niche here. Your frameworks and methodology around your area of expertise. Why your business's methodology on X should be listened to. Okay. The success here is, well, it's demonstrating expertise, it's demonstrating subject matter knowledge. The goal, to nurture your audience, start to develop more stronger ties, bring people on this journey, i.e. through the funnel. How do you measure success? Well, are you getting insightful comments from your relevant ICPs? That's probably a goal here. If you're targeting lawyers or people in finance and you're getting comments from people in law and finance, that content is striking the right chord. We work with a property investor that's trying to connect with other property investors. Are those property investors commenting on his content? Well, if the answer is yes, we're doing something right. And the final type of content as we funnel down is conversion content. This is hyper specific to your ICP. It's where you make them an offer. Case studies, impact studies, reports, stuff that is literally written for the people you want as your next client. So if you are a consumer brand in wellness, in fashion, and you're selling a product to people, UGC case studies work quite well there. Unboxing videos and someone saying, wow, this was amazing, or something slightly more exciting than that, right? That is really kind of the proof is in the pudding there. That's why people should buy. Case studies, 5-star reviews, talking about the successes and testimonials of previous clients. Really, really important. What does success look like here? Well, people are reaching out to you. People are sliding into those DMs and wanting to have a conversation. Your goal here is to convert your audience into partners, into potential investors, into clients, into people who buy your products. The only measure of success here is really leads, conversations. Are people buying your product or jumping on a webinar or jumping on a sales call with you? Okay, that's what my metric is for us as a business. We're creating great content. We're getting lots of eyeballs. As we bring people down that journey, start talking about kind of case studies and impact studies and the report that we've published, our KPI off the back of that is, okay, well, how many leads have we got from that? How many discovery calls, conversations are we having with prospects? And then how many of those are we closing? Hopefully, with that strategy, with a bit of consistency, a bit of tenacity, doing that for a few months, you'll grow your audience, you'll grow your followers, you'll see more inbound opportunities. You might close some deals. You might get some opportunities that you didn't know existed. Doors might open that you didn't know were there, right? Building a personal brand has genuinely, and I do not mean this, changed my life, right? It has opened up employment opportunities, board positions, speaking gigs, talking at events like this, speaking on stage. And I'm so glad I did it. And believe me, I don't post every day, as some gurus suggest. I'm not on 14 different channels, right? I do what's right for me, what's sustainable for me, in line with my goals and objectives. And that's all you need to do. There's a lot of outside noise when it comes to building your personal brand. Understanding why you want to do it and what your objectives are, that's what you need to listen to. We're done. I can have a sleep now. I can have a power nap.
Oh, that was such an amazing session. I think everyone can agree that we all learned so much. And yeah, and I think there's some questions coming in, but I think because we're out of time. But hopefully you have Lewis's email and feel free to connect as he's mentioned. But again, thank you so much, Lewis, for the time and for doing such a great session, and everyone who attended today. And as Lewis said, we all wish you take on all the advice, the good ones. Everything's great, actually. So, and we see it happen with your business. And just a reminder for the next sessions, we do have an inspirational talk coming the following Wednesday. So we have Mary Agbisanwa, who's the founder of Now You're Talking Network. And the following Wednesday, the first Wednesday of May, we have Olivia Jenkins of D. Lewis, which is as you know, a jewelry brand who's like multi-million jewelry brand. My tongue. But again,
It's a hard
yeah.
word, isn't it, to say. I struggled on a few words in that talk.
Yeah, but thank you so much again, and Louis especially for your time, and everyone, and we'll see you again next time.
Thank you, everyone.
Okay,
All the
have
best.
a good rest of the day.
Bye bye.
Thank you.
Bye bye.